Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today here on Point of View. And of course, yesterday we announced and talked quite a bit about the decision by Anthony Kennedy to step down, and the Supreme Court essentially is over. But it is interesting because sometimes they go to the very last day. They really, in a sense, ended yesterday, but before they went out of town, did something else, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. You might remember the case with Marianne Sauce, who was told that she could not pray. Well, the Supreme Court reversed that. Didn't actually render a decision, to simply reverse the decision that came down. So tomorrow we'll have Kelly Shackelford here. How we're going to fit all of this in, because we're going to talk about a couple of these religious liberty cases, talking about his case, Marianne Sauce, talk about whether or not a few of his cases will go to the Supreme Court. And that's just for starters. So there's just a lot to talk about. But let me just real quickly mention that we are going to be paying a lot of attention to who Donald Trump decides to nominate to the court. And the odds-on favorite that I mentioned yesterday, which a lot of people are talking about, is a man by the name of Brett Kavanaugh, individual that actually serves in the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in the District of Columbia, which is oftentimes the farm team, if you will, for the Supreme Court. So he is one individual. Another real possibility is Thomas Hardiman. You might remember last time there were two individuals that Donald Trump met with. One was Neil Gorsuch, who became the nominee, and the other was Thomas Hardiman out of Pennsylvania, sits on a Circuit Court of Appeals with Donald Trump's sister. So that's kind of interesting. If indeed he decides to go to a non-judge, well, that'd be Mike Lee, who's been on the program with us. If he goes to a Texas judge, well, that would be Don Willett, who's been on the program with us as well. So we'll see where this goes. And, one of the articles we've posted, which I'll talk about more in a few hours, has to do with the fact that in addition to this appointment, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, as we mentioned the other day, is 85. By August, Justice Breyer will be 80. So the two of the most liberal people on the court also may step down. So this could be very interesting indeed. So those are some topics we will address a little bit later in the program. Let me also mention that next hour, Donna Skell and Lisa Worley will be with us, and we'll talk about, as we always do, the Christian Writers Conference. And if you are in Dallas, it's easy for you to attend because that will be taking place later this month. If you're listening from somewhere else in the country, I would encourage you to book your ticket now and make a point of arriving here and learning from some of the experts. But we are going to give you another opportunity, and that is an opportunity to serve. This is something I wanted to talk about, and we have before. If you've been with us any length of time, you know that we've talked with Scott Sheppard about 6 stones. Think about maybe it's this summer. Maybe you have a young person around the house and they're just kind of bored, and you're saying, if you could do a work project or a missions project, this would probably help on your resume and certainly help in your personal growth. So this and talking about Six Stones Ministry. So Scott, welcome back to Point of View.
Kerby, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here today.
And again, this is Scott Sheppard, and I think we have the microphone on, don't we? So we'll find out very quickly if we do. And again, he's a native of Euless and also an individual that majored in architecture. And then I guess we just have to tell the story. A lot of people say, how did you get from architecture to running this ministry? And it's a really good story, isn't it?
Well, it's a crazy story, and I tell people all the time, my whole life seems to be a series of left turns, to be honest with you. Thought I was actually going to be an orthodontist, then an architect, and then in my mid-30s, God pulled me into my home church at First Baptist Euless, and so I served there for 11 years, and then we made some transitions as a staff and as a congregation and wound up launching a nonprofit, which I have no background in, but it's been an incredible journey.
Well, again, let's talk about all the different aspects of that, because one of the reasons I want to do this is to really challenge some of our listeners who maybe have heard you speak before, saying, well, what could I do? Or maybe is this an opportunity for a young person to really get a vision? Lots of times we encourage young people to go on a short-term missions trip, and if you want to go to Honduras and you want to go to Haiti and you want to go to Africa, great. But, we got a mission field right here in our backyard, don't we?
Oh, my gosh. We've got a huge mission field. And I could elaborate on that because even in our school district in HEB ISD, we have 119 nations already there. So you don't have to go very far. But, no, this is a great time. It's a great time, actually, I think, in our nation, Kirby, because right now there is a sense for volunteerism.
Yes.
So, yes, we could take students. We can take community service. But I'm telling you, corporate America is also on the rampage to find great opportunities to serve and to give back. So it's a good season right now for those of faith and for nonprofits.
Well, and again, you don't have to have a lot of expertise, do you? So again, if you're willing to take somebody off the street that says, I've really never done any of this before, you can train them, can't you?
Oh, absolutely. Especially with, and there's a lot of our friends in the area, but we have such a diversity of things that we can do. That's, I think, the beauty of what we've been able to do the last couple of years. We started like most. We thought it was going to be a typical emergency assistance type thing, food pantry clothes, but it's evolved in a lot of other things. So we can go paint. We can work on houses. We can help school kids. We can work in our urban farm. We can go work in multifamily communities. I mean, we have a lot of diversity for folks.
Well, let's see if we can talk a little bit how this developed, because you thought maybe we're just going to revitalize a house. And, again, that fits pretty well with your background in architecture, but it blew up really quickly into a lot more, didn't it?
Absolutely. We thought we were doing the one typical thing like a church, the one event, the one house. And really, Kirby, I think we woke up and realized that over the course of time, 100-year-old Southern Baptist Church, demographics have changed, economics have changed, community had changed. Dallas-Fort Worth is blowing and going economically, but there is, back to that diversity thing, there's 119 nations in our school district. Those people are coming to the land of opportunity for jobs, but it also brings some challenges for us, too.
Yes. Well, let's talk about that for just a minute, because, again, you built one house, but then the city said, can you do this more often? I just love the whole story. So again, if people are not familiar, talk about how this one-off became an entire ministry.
Absolutely. We approached our local municipality, the area city of Euless, and we just said, hey, we'd love to serve you in some way. We had a little bit of a different idea of what we wanted to do, and they came to us and said, no, this is what we really need help with. And it was on their housing stock.
Yes.
That's true of every city in America, even Highland Park. They've got code enforcement issues somewhere that have to be addressed, and they don't have a solution. So the idea was simply, if we had a little bit of money and you had volunteers, could we leverage you to make a difference in the community? It took 2 years to find their money, but it was a great experience for us to be able to lean in, serve them, give back, and then it kind of inspired our congregation to say, hey, we need to do more. We've got to do more.
Well, and code enforcement was where they could cite an individual because in some way their house was not up to code.
Exactly.
But if you are poor or you do not have resources or you are not even mobile, you don't know how to begin to even deal with that issue. So they could I have all sorts of various code violations tacked to the door, but unless somebody comes alongside like your church did, that's just never going to happen, is it?
It's not going to happen. And that's what the cities are saying. Hey, you're giving us a solution now to a problem that we could not fix. And like you said, it could be economic, and that's why the house got ugly or didn't get painted or it's got coded. Yeah. But you hit it well. Veterans, widows, single moms. I mean, there's a lot of circumstances. Life happens sometimes. We've all had those experiences. And so this is a great opportunity for a city to be benevolent.
Yes. We're going to take a break, and we're going to continue our conversation with Scott Sheppard, but I'd also encourage you, if you'd like to give us a call. Maybe you have some, well, I can do this, is there a place for me here kind of question, or otherwise just sit back and maybe take some notes. But my goal here is that by the end of the program, some of you will say, okay, I could probably do that. I could go to the New Hope Center. I could maybe help with some of the building. I could maybe help with one of the schools. Or perhaps you are saying, well, I like what they're doing there in Euless and Arlington, but I could do it in my own community, and we'll see if we can multiply that as well. So let's take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Scott Sheppard, and we're talking about Six Stones Ministry. You can find more about that on our website, pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
If you do an online search of the term cultural Marxism, you will see a Wikipedia entry that dismisses it as a conspiracy theory that is supposedly trying to take over Western culture. Actually, it is the dominant form of Marxism in America and in much of the West today. Dr. Paul Kenger was on Point of View Radio Talk Show with me to talk about his recent article about cultural Marxism. He explained that cultural Marxism began about a century ago in Germany because the proponents felt that orthodox Marxism was too limiting and too narrow. They wanted revolutionary changes in marriage, sexuality, and family. They looked to the universities as a place where their ideas could be launched. They could organize the students, the artists, and the media to transform Western society. Instead of focusing on an economic war, they wanted to bring a cultural war. One of the key figures in cultural Marxism was Antonio Gramsci, who taught that we should seize the cultural means of production. That would be the media and the universities. He believed that the social transformation would be able to march through the institutions. One place where cultural Marxism is evident today is in what is called cultural theory. Paul Kenger reminded us that Barack Obama's alma mater, Occidental College, has a Department of Critical Theory and Social Justice. It promises to instruct students in the principles of Marxism, psychoanalysis, the Frankfurt School, deconstructionism, critical race studies, queer theory, feminist theory, and post-colonial theory. If you've been near a college campus lately, this should all sound very familiar. This is not a conspiracy theory, but an accurate picture of the march of cultural Marxism through the institutions. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Privileged to have Scott Sheppard in studio with us today. And if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. And if you would like to know more, you can certainly go to our website, pointofview.net, or just type in 6stones.org. It's the number 6stones.org. And one of the things we've been talking about, Scott, is what you call your community-powered revitalization. Hurst, Euless, Bedford, Cleburne, Richland Hills, those kinds of areas. And again, if people aren't in that community, they might consider doing the same. But talk about this for just a minute, because as we mentioned just a minute ago, code enforcement and code violations are kind of what the city can do. Here's the problem. But you came in to say, well, then maybe we can actually provide the solution.
Absolutely. We wanted a way to serve our cities, and churches everywhere are waking up to wanting to do that right now. But, you know, even a biblical context, I mean, a cup of cold water in the name of Jesus.
Yes.
If it takes a 2x4, it takes a hammer or paintbrush, then why aren't we doing it?
Yeah.
And so that was the impetus of that. But the deeper we got into it, the bigger the problems were, because it sounds benevolent on the city side. But I love your intro a while ago. This is also shaping a little bit of the local municipalities. Kenny Marchant, our U.S. Congressman, said, the reason I love you is you're doing grassroots transformation,
right? Not
from Washington down, from bottom up, because we're coming in, offering a solution and sometimes a biblical worldview on some of this, but that's what we're called to do, is to serve. For them, however, it's about economics. Right?
Yeah.
Your housing stock's going off the end of the table. You're not going to get the new Dunkin' Donuts and the Walmart and those things. So we found a need, and we just tried to address it.
Well, again, for just a minute, for people that are saying, well, I happen to live in that area, or we would like to do this in our own area, How do you begin to surface that? Is it the city itself that begins to identify some of those issues?
Typically, it's the city. They're kind of hamstrung, as we said a while ago. They've got the code enforcement issue, the writing tickets, but they need a solution. So what we see, to be honest with you, sometimes it's a city manager that calls and says, "Hey, this is a solution. We'd like to talk to you." Sometimes it's a church. It's a pastor that says, "We don't know what to do, but can you show us?" Sometimes it's a business leader. We've had it come from different areas, city council person. It's just amazing where it comes from.
So again, and then you are putting together individuals, so it's almost like a Habitat for Humanity kind of mindset, except it's really for existing buildings, right?
Exactly. It's for existing homeowners. I love Habitat. We've been able to partner with them in some different ways, but this is in your village. We love to say it takes a village to change a village.
Yeah.
And so this is solutions for your village, your hometown. And that's what we've tried to develop, is not only in our part of the world, and you've alluded to it, but we built the playbooks and systems to hopefully help other communities replicate this, because we're also leveraging this not only against the city, but Texas state law and some other things that help in the funding strategies.
Yeah. Well, again, I want to encourage you to go to 6stones.org and find out a little bit more, and maybe you can replicate this in your city or your community. But how do you find your volunteers? Again, I assume most of them are from your church, but I'm sure you have some people that say, be honest with you, I've never held a hammer in my life.
That's very true.
Something like that.
That's very true. And then most of it is pretty low level. But I'll tell you what, as I mentioned earlier, the desire for volunteerism is, I can't say that word very well today, so rampant. Churches are wanting to do this now, Kirby. Corporate America is leaning in, trying to find ways to do that. Matter of fact, they're trying to do that because they're being forced by millennials.
Yes.
Does your corporation have purpose? What are you doing to make social justice happen? And so that's an opportunity. A lot of times it's the city employees that say, "Hey, we're not the bad guys. We want to serve and give back too."
Yeah.
And so that happens. You just see it all across. Volunteerism is big right now.
Yes. And talk about, just before we move on to the next one, what people would do, because sort of we've talked about construction, but sometimes it's just mowing the lawn, it's edging it, it's slapping some paint on, whatever it is. There are all sorts of, give us a range of some of the kinds of things you've had to do.
Well, when we do this logistically, it's everything from just event coordination all the way down to the construction component, but we also have processes in there. We got to feed those people. And so sometimes it's senior adult ministries that say, "Hey, all I can do is deliver lunches to volunteers."
What a great deal.
And then you've got your restaurants that actually donate the food to do that. So it's linking that whole village and giving everybody some piece of that.
Yeah. 6 Stones. Let's, if we can, talk about the New Hope Center.
Sure.
And I've had some people say, I didn't want to go to these kinds of places where, we have to give away all these kinds of activities and resources and clothes and everything like that. But again, you've thought of some ways to do this in a very creative way.
Well, we hope so. It's a centralized, there's lots of these food pantries and whatnot around.
Yeah.
And so I think where you're headed with that too, Kirby, is we've seen over the course of time, yes, there are those that are the chronic homelessness or poor, but at the same time, life happens. And then as we've talked about already in the show, with the diversity that's coming to Dallas-Fort Worth from all over the world.
That's right.
Our superintendent used to say Dallas-Fort Worth is the Ellis Island of the 21st century.
Mm-hmm.
And so those families need help. They're looking for a way out. So we can give them practical solutions, and then hopefully we give them biblical solutions on top of that down the road. And so, and then sometimes even in this great economy, you lose a job. And you got to have somebody to fill that gap for you.
And again, we've talked about the refugee ministries that have existed in this country and even in this city. And, of course, recently we did one talking about what was happening in Chicago. But in every case, you're dealing, as you said, with people from more than 100 different countries.
Yes.
English is not their first language, so there's a real need there, too, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Our school, and this would be true in Dallas-Fort Worth, but our school district has 74 dialects spoken in the homes, and 25% of those homes do not speak English other than the children. And so they're learning it at school. So, as you said earlier, foreign mission field, it's right here, but we have to deal with it today. And really, I think as we kind of head this way on the school side, Kirby, there's a lot of entities. Most entities can actually say, if you don't have a green card, you're not legal, we can't serve you. And I know there's a lot of turmoil on the border of Texas.
Yeah.
But the reality is our school systems have to serve, educate, and feed these kids. There's no questions asked.
Yeah.
So who's going to step in and fill that gap? I think the church should.
Yeah, I think so. Which gets to the other one. We've talked already about the New Hope Center, but you have this Operation Back to School, and I thought that would be a really important time to talk about what people can do in the next couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that we just got out of school a couple of weeks ago and we're planning vacation, but we're not. We're planning for back to school. We started in February, and so it goes back to our school systems have to feed, educate, and they need the right tools. And so we built a system with our district with technology, qualifications, all those things, so we get the right tools to the right kids. But yeah, that's for us, that's August 11th. And matter of fact, if you really want to be blessed, come serve with us and see what that looks like. Yeah, it's the face of poverty, but the joy that comes with that and being able to be a part of that process, we'd love for you to see that. We've got some cool videos online that folks can go see what it looked like in the past. But yeah, there's nothing better to see a child's face light up, because for you and I, Kerby, I'm not going to speak for you, but when you started school, you were probably excited with your brand new supplies and you had your brand new shoes and outfit. And what if you're the kid at school and you showed up with a pencil they found on the couch?
Which is about it, yeah.
Yeah. What does it do to your self-esteem? Are you ready to learn? Are you in the right environment? This is what this does. This empowers these kids.
No, it's very good. Again, sixtones.org. We'll come back and talk a little bit more, but if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. But as well, let me, as we're going to a break, mention the fact that we also really want to encourage you to support this ministry. And Susan DeCure has some comments about the impact that Point of View had in her life.
Well, at the time, I had a 5-year-old daughter. And my husband and I were looking into private Christian schools. And we weren't really happy with what we were finding out there. And they were very costly, and I preferred to be a stay-at-home mom. And at the time, I had a home daycare. And I thought, I don't want to stay home and take care of other people's children and send my daughter off to school. So I was an avid Point of View listener when I became a Christian. And one day Marlene was talking about homeschooling, and it I kind of perked up and listened, because it was kind of a new concept at the time. And the more I listened, the more I was convinced that that's what the Lord would have us do. I had an older son in the public school system and had not had a good experience in a lot of ways with that. So when I talked to my husband about what I heard on Marley Maddox, he was a little skeptical. And then I heard about a Greg Harris homeschool workshop, and I talked him into going to that with me. And because he thought these homeschoolers were surely just from the hippie days, a bunch of rebels. So I took him to this workshop. And the more we heard Greg Harris talk on the topic of homeschooling and the curriculum that was already out there that we could purchase, and in Texas it was legal to homeschool, and the more and more we were convinced, and the Lord showed my husband that was the way he would have us go with our daughter. And we had this sweet little girl, and we didn't want her corrupted by the world, and I just wasn't ready to send her out there with the wolves, so to speak. And she's homeschooling her 3 children, by the way.
And again, Susan DeCure just talking a little bit about the impact that Point of View had in her life. And as we're going to a break, we first of all encourage you to go to the website pointofview.net, and also we have a link to sixstones.org. And if you find yourself saying, I really appreciate the kind of news, information, and commentary that I receive here, we hope you also click on that button that says donate. Or, of course, you can call 800-347-5151. We'll be right back.
Is there such a thing as too many happy endings? For the past few weeks, you've been hearing a lot of stories Point of View listeners like you have made happen by investing in this work and joining this team. Very simply, without you, those stories would not happen. But we strongly believe there are many more stories that need happy endings. And though we've seen great things, we dare not relax at a time when our nation seems as divided as ever. The number of stories we can write over the next year will largely be decided in the next few hours. Tomorrow is the end of our fiscal year. The clock runs out to strategize what we can do together in the coming 12 months. Step up now. Your gift still applies to our matching challenge and will have double the impact, but you can't wait anymore. Please call right now, 1-800-347-5151, or visit pointofview.net. Our future is now, right now. 1-800-347-5151 and pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, let me just encourage you to go to our webpage, pointofview.net, for a couple of reasons. First of all, of course, this is the last few days before the end of our fiscal year, so we really do depend upon your financial gifts to support this ministry, so you can help us out. That would be greatly appreciated, and I'll come back and talk more about that in just a minute. My viewpoints commentary today on cultural Marxism, and perhaps that's a phrase you've never heard before, and we spent some time talking with Paul Kenger about that recently, and so I summarize that in that particular section. And if you go to our Take Action section, it says, a critical time to pray. The vacancy on the Supreme Court presents a unique opportunity to defend our values in the culture. Justice Kennedy has been the swing vote in many decisions and has had a profound impact on religious liberty and other issues. And if you click through there, you will see an opportunity for you to actually just leave your name and your email. And the reason for that is that we want to give you some Pray for America updates. We believe that this is going to be a very significant battle, and we will have an opportunity to send you some of this material, and you can determine whether or not you'd like to get it by email, or if you give us your address, we'll send it to you as well. And those are some opportunities for you to take action. So that is now active. And so let me just encourage you, if you are concerned about the future of America, and in light of the conversation I know we're going to have tomorrow with Kelly Shackelford about this whole issue of the future of the Supreme Court, religious liberty, sign up in our Take Action section at pointofview.net. As you go there, of course, you'll also find out about sixstones.org. And we are privileged to have in studio for a little bit longer Scott Sheppard. And Scott, let's talk about how churches can get involved. We've been talking up until now about how individuals can get involved. A lot of churches might say, I don't have the infrastructure. I don't have the technology to make this happen. What did you have to go through there at the churches that are involved to actually make this happen?
Absolutely. Well, we skinned our knees first and foremost in a lot of different ways on technology and all those things. But our heartbeat from the beginning was to create not only the vehicle to bless and to give back, but how do we do that so simply? I tell, and I wish I could show this on your webpage. You know, it's like the old Mr. Miyagi. Yeah. If you can paint, if you can hammer, if you can hand. We've tried to keep it so simple. So because the church has got a focus, it's got a mission, and we want to dovetail in and catalyze that. We love that word. But gosh, if we make it too hard, it's not profitable for them. And so we try to do that in every arena, not just the church, but anybody. But yeah, make it real simple that they can come serve. Because what we also want to build is build relationship and build community. Can they bring someone from the church with them? Could they bring someone from the neighborhood with them? The office, the cubicle, the little league? So then it becomes really not only discipleship, me living out my faith, but how can I evangelize through this process as well?
Yes. You know, a lot of pastors might think, Scott, well, do I have to have a person on staff that's kind of our community outreach person or something like that? But you've made it a lot easier, haven't you?
We've made it a lot easier. And that's who we actually deal with a lot of time is the outreach or missions pastor and say, hey, just tell me what the group is. Here's the registration process, all the waivers, all that kind of stuff is taken care of. And so it's almost like going on a cruise, but for missions. Yeah. And so we've made it as simple as we can because the church needs to be focused on its mission as well.
And again, that's a metaphor that I wanted to use, or an illustration I wanted to use. You, every summer, in any church in the country that I've ever been in, have short-term missions, and they have to deal with the sign-ups and the travel expenses, and they get the waivers for insurance and all that kind of stuff. Now, you don't have any travel expenses, so you eliminate that one. But instead of, or in addition to, going to Haiti or Africa or Guatemala, whatever it might be, how about going to Hearst, Euless, Bedford, Cleburne, something like that, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. We've got opportunities all summer long that we can engage people in, and really got some lanes they can run into. And so whether it's to serve and to give, we even have groups that are going out and working in multifamily communities. They're knocking on doors and sharing their faith, learning how to share their faith. We can train you how to do that, too, if you'd like to.
Well, again, evangelism would be a great opportunity. And as you well know, there are a lot of people in our churches that have never shared Christ with anybody, never seen anyone come to know the Lord. And that's, again, one of the exciting things about short-term missions is individuals oftentimes do see that.
Absolutely.
But, again, you don't have to go overseas to contact 119 different countries because they're right there, aren't they? In that school district.
Right there. You name it.
Let's talk about some of the people in there because you and I talked about off-air. There are all sorts of individuals, some of whom are persecuted Christians. So it's not just that you're talking to people that have never heard the message of Jesus Christ. Some of them came here with the clothes on their back at best.
Oh, absolutely.
And they have faced persecution all their life, and they're so thrilled to meet fellow Christians who can minister to them in one way.
Oh, absolutely. It was shocking for us. About 4 years ago, our superintendent, Dr. Buinger, said that Dallas-Fort Worth has become the Ellis Island of the 21st century.
Wow.
And he said the reality is not only do we have great opportunity, but to your point, Egyptian Coptics. When we had all the unrest in Egypt several years ago, he said we will read the newspaper because we know it's hours, days, or weeks before those folks are getting off a plane in Dallas. Mm-hmm. And they're looking for a place for asylum, for work, whatever it may be, an opportunity. But yeah, you've got from Africa, from Egypt, Middle East. You go around the world, and where they're persecuted, they need help, and here they come.
And some of them come with some pretty significant expertise. For our listeners out here that might say, I just have trouble filling some of these positions because I'm looking for somebody that has a good work ethic and maybe even was trained. Some of these people come with graduate degrees, college degrees, expertise. Because they were persecuted, now they have an opportunity to use those skills right here in the United States of America.
Absolutely. It's a little bit challenging on some of them because, as to your point, Kirby, lawyers, doctors, pharmacists. I can go down the list of very high-trained individuals. Mm-hmm. And when they came here, because it doesn't necessarily translate,
right, they've
got skills and abilities. They've got talents. It's not just the poor refugee that we would think off the street. But to your point, these guys have capacity. Now, maybe a different job or arena they can go in, but they're highly employable.
Mm-hmm.
So,
now, how good are some of them in terms of their English? We just talked about this a minute ago. And, of course, a lot of churches have ESL programs and things like that. But what are some of the needs there?
Absolutely. Well, as you go up, as you can imagine, on the education scale, so does the English and proficiency there, too. So, yeah, we struggle with some of them. Some of them it's very broken English, whether it be Congolese or Farsi or some of those things when they come over. But some of them most of the world is bilingual. It's us in America that necessarily aren't bilingual.
Yeah. And again, they have learned in many of these countries that the path to success is knowing English. So sometimes their English is very good.
Absolutely.
Now, do they have transportation? Is that another issue that you have to address sometimes?
Oh, wow. That's a huge one. You just open a can of worms for the entire Dallas-Fort Worth area. Even though we have DART, even though we have the T over in Fort Worth, mass transportation is a huge issue, and many of these families, and that's true for refugees, that's true for even some of us here that live on the bottom end of the economic scale. But you'd be surprised how many families actually have to walk to work, walk to the grocery store. It's a big issue. It's a big issue for us, and a lot of our county officials and state officials are wrestling with that. And we talk about high-speed rail from Houston to Dallas. We got to get people to grocery stores and jobs.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was just thinking. There just could be ministry of using your car to help them get to a doctor's appointment or something like that is not within walking distance, right?
Absolutely. I can give you a couple examples. Matter of fact, Mission Arlington, she's the largest transportation is what I'm told in the city of Arlington. They have 70 vehicles in their fleet. Sorry, can't get that out. And that's what they do. And so Mid-Cities Care Corps over in HEB area, they do it with senior adults. Sometimes it's just that simple. It's kind of old Uber, really. They stole maybe a good idea, but sometimes it's just simply that.
Yeah. So again, just a couple of opportunities for you. And again, it's at sixstones.org. What kind of expertise would somebody need if they were to actually join your staff? Is that even a possibility, or are there possibilities for like a summer internship or something like that? Let's talk about those opportunities.
Absolutely. We're constantly looking for good talent, and I would say come watch the website and see what we're doing. The other side of it is, yes, we love to. Matter of fact, that's one of the strategies we have is to try to bring folks in and intern them either from the local school or the local junior college. There's some opportunities there we brought in, and even in simple things like communications, social media, web design. We've got a lot of things you could do to help a nonprofit. And that's true for a lot of nonprofits. Those are luxuries a lot of time. And so to your point, we actually have a graduate of Trinity High School on our staff who has a degree in communications. His sole job is to be our storyteller.
That is incredible.
So go check out some of our great videos and stories, but that's his job.
Let's, if I can, as we're going to a break, encourage you to go to that website because, again, as you go there, you're going to find that, first of all, you go to sixstones.org, and then they have a way in which you can join, and you can actually click on some of the videos that are there. One of the first videos I would recommend is one where you're on it, and it's about 2.5 minutes long. And one of the things I always encourage you to do as you listen to some of the interviews that we do is take this YouTube video, it's about 2.5 minutes, and you'll notice an arrow in the upper right-hand corner, and that's a share button. So take that and post it on your Facebook page, or maybe send it to your missions pastor, or maybe you don't know the missions pastor's email. Certainly you can probably find the email for somebody at the church, because they may not even be aware of this. And then you can, of course, add something to it and say, I heard this interview, thought it was really interesting. Is this something our church would like to get involved with? Or if you're listening in another place and say, couldn't we do this in our community? We'll talk more about some of those opportunities. One of those mandatory breaks. We'll come back with Scott Sheppard right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. In 1925, the Bladensburg World War I Veterans Memorial was erected to honor the 49 men of Prince George's County, Maryland, who gave their lives in World War I. It stands outside of Washington, D.C., in the median near the National Defense Highway. This memorial, one of the oldest memorials on U.S. soil to honor the fallen of World War I, has stood without complaint for nearly a century. For the first time in over 9 decades, the American Humanist Association voiced a complaint. They filed a federal lawsuit seeking to topple the memorial because those who erected it chose the shape of a cross to honor the fallen. One of the mothers who supported the memorial early on noted to her senator that her son died and was buried in Europe. Though she could not visit his grave there, she said, she considered the Bladensburg World War I memorial to be her son's grave marker close to home. First Liberty Institute, along with our volunteer attorneys at the law firm of Jones Day, represents the American Legion who erected the memorial in 1925. This memorial was erected to honor heroes who gave their lives in defense of freedom. To tear this memorial down now would not only desecrate their memory, it would demonstrate a level of hostility to religion that our founding fathers warned against. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Guide at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. Let me also mention that in the next hour, we're going to be talking about the Roaring Lambs Christian Writers Conference. We do a conversation about that every day. Donna Skell and Lisa Worley will be in studio with us, and so this is going to be a great opportunity to hear from them. In studio with me for another few minutes, Scott Sheppard, and let's, if we can, highlight a couple of ministries. One, August 11th, that's a key date, and so that gets back to the Operation Back to School. And if you go to the website, the middle button to click or the one on the right-hand side, either way will take you to Operation Back to School. Now, you really need a fair number of volunteers for August 11th, don't you?
Well, we'll have probably 3,000 kiddos and their parents come through the building. And so we project about 900 volunteers to help us with that day. And so you can come in for a couple hours. You can come in all day if you want, however you want to do that. A lot of people come and then they just stay all day. They just love it because it's just a blast to see those kids. But, yeah, that'd be a great experience for folks to see it in action, how we do it. And then also, too, we've got that day, by the way, Kirby, what we call backstage for folks.
Yes,
and so
backstage.
if you'd like to learn this and replicate this, come and see.
Well, and that's another thing. Let's say if we can kind of work our way through. When people go to Six Stones and click on the menu goes on for like a page and a half. So it's like overkill. So let's talk about how, first of all, let me just talk about Operation Back to School. Statistics there say 55% of Hurst, Euless, Bedford ISD students come from homes that are economically disadvantaged. So we are talking about an incredible need. So those are HEB students. And again, you can help a student start the year for a donation. So we certainly encourage you to make that donation. August 11th at Campus West, which is on Industrial Boulevard in Bedford.
Yes.
And so you can find out about that. It's 9 to 4, how you can volunteer, how you can give, and how you can exhibit. And all sorts of details are there. So everything you need to know is there. But you also talked about when you click on the menu section, you got one, it's called Backstage Pass. Talk about that.
Absolutely. We have always opened the back door for other communities. Our heartbeat would to encourage other communities to replicate what we're doing. Kirby, what we've seen by leaning into our city and our school district, we've seen 6,700 people come to faith in Christ in those ministries. And so if there's any way we could help another community replicate that and mobilize the church and its entire community, we want to do that. So that's what that day's about. Come and see how we execute, ask questions, maybe dream about what you might be able to do in your community.
You also have a calendar of events and some other resources there. And also a cart, which I thought I might mention because there are some things that people can get a hold of or use or find resources for. So talk about what is available when you land on that website.
Oh, gosh. We want to take you through maybe some of our programming. We want to take you to, it'll actually drop you off even to another website we have called Catalyst of Hope Network,
yes. Mm-hmm.
which is part of that strategy to bless other communities and coach and teach. So we're trying to do that too. So, whatever it is, I need to learn. I want to serve. I want to give back. It's just, there's a platform for everybody to have a piece.
Yes. And again, as I said at the beginning, but again, people tune in and tune out. I think that during this summer, you might have a young person just kind of sitting around the house. They're playing video games, and you're saying, I need to get you out and do something. And it maybe is too late to think about going to a short-term mission trip to Africa or Asia or something like that. But this would, first of all, be a great opportunity to really expand their vision.
Absolutely.
Number two, it really would look very good on a little resume later on when they go to college because they were involved in community service. And there's just a range of activities. So you might have young people that have some computer background or graphics background. Well, they can help there. You have some that say, well, they really don't know much about construction, but they can still swing a paintbrush.
Oh, yeah.
Or they can certainly spend some time knowing a little bit more about how to serve there at the New Hope Center. Talk about some of the different ways in which you could get involved young people today.
Oh, absolutely. Well, definitely New Hope Center is a great place to jump off for folks. They can come, they can stack cans and fold clothes and all those things. It sounds so exciting. But one thing we've got in conjunction with that is an urban farm.
Yeah, that's right. And we haven't talked about that.
So we actually have, during the school year, we have 3 different classes that come out of the high school that are using that for training, teaching, science, technology. STEM is the big thing right now. And so we need people to come pick grapes and strawberries and things like that during the summer. So that's kind of fun for somebody to have a new experience, especially if you just hold up in an apartment all your life. You've never experienced a farm. So come on out and see us with that. But, yeah, there's always something we can do around there. You bet.
One more time, just before we get too far into the end of the program, I wanted to maybe have you challenge pastors to think about this, because either they can joint venture with you in your community or they can take this and apply it in their own. And you know the concern that most pastors have, okay, how much time is it going to take? How much resources? But again, this is going to be something that's going to bear incredible evangelistic fruit, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I think there's the tension, as you said, about what's it going to cost me to do this. But at the same time, we just left a board meeting today, and I wished I had him here with me, Robert White over at Freedom Church. And he said, you can't imagine what this has done for our congregation.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, they were a church plant last year running about 250. They have focused on blessing their community and leaning in. Now they're running almost 500. And he said it's directly because of our impact on our local community.
Mm-hmm.
So much so, we all hear the phrase, if your church closed its doors today, would you be missed?
Yeah.
The elementary school that they serve through our ministries came to them. The principal said, "We see you growing. Please do not move because of space issues. You're that important to us."
Wow.
That's a practical application on what the church needs to be doing.
And so often we have people say, well, if your church was not here or your Christian family moved, would there be a difference? And the answer is yes.
Absolutely.
That tells you a lot right there. One more time, then, we want to encourage people to go to sixstones.org. There's the New Hope Center. There is the community-powered revitalization that we already talked about earlier, Operation Back to School, which I want to focus on. Of course, you have a Night to Hope coming up, right? We haven't mentioned that either.
Oh, gosh, that's a crown jewel for us. We work all year to get to do that because Kerby will actually support 4,000 kids at Christmas in 20 elementary schools. But that's where our local churches, through this program, get to lean in, host those parties with even folks not in the church. But we actually get to share the gospel and the true story of Christmas on the school campus during that year. And in our 9 years, we've seen 3,800 parents and children pray to receive Christ. So can you pray at school? Absolutely. Can you evangelize at school? Absolutely. Just got to know how to do it.
That's right.
We want to help you.
So again, August 11th, very important date.
Yes.
And then as you get into the fall, the Christmas opportunities as well.
Absolutely.
And of course, all year round, the New Hope Center and just the whole idea of community revitalization. And I just appreciate you being willing to step out of your comfort zone. And I would encourage our listeners to step out of their comfort zone and get involved with Six Stones Ministry. So thanks again for coming in here today.
Absolutely. Kerby, thank you, and God bless you for the ministry you bring to this nation.
Well, thank you. And let's, if we can, take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Christian writing. But just before we do so, let me just, again, point you to the website. You can go to sixstones.org, but also our website is pointofview.net. And what we have there is an opportunity for you to join with us. We are dependent upon your financial gifts to bring these programs to you. And I know many of you are listening on this particular hour, which is a relatively new hour. We've always broadcast for, actually, almost 45 years, from 1 to 3. But now we've added this noontime hour in some of the local stations here in Dallas, as well as all the way up to Minnesota. And so I recognize that this may be somewhat new for you to listen to this program, but it certainly has probably been on long enough for you to say, oh, I believe in this ministry, so I might want to give a gift to support this ministry. And as we come to the end of our fiscal year, which ends this Friday, which is tomorrow, we do encourage you to make a donation, and you can click on that button that says donate. And I might just mention, I haven't said this until now, we do have a match fund. That means if you decide to give $100, it becomes $200. $200 becomes $400. So let me encourage you to be generous and recognize that any gift that you make will be doubled. And so, again, you can go to the website, pointofview.net, or, of course, you can also call the pledge line number. That's 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. Come back, we're going to talk about the Christian Writers Conference. If you're a writer, I know you want to be listening. If you know somebody that is, you might want to encourage them to tune in the program and listen in and find out about this wonderful Christian Writers program.
Is there such a thing as too many happy endings? For the past few weeks, you've been hearing a lot of stories point of view listeners like you have made happen by investing in this work and joining this team. Very simply, without you, those stories would not happen. But we strongly believe there are many more stories that need happy endings. And though we've seen great things, we dare not relax at a time when our nation seems as divided as ever. The number of stories we can write over the next year will largely be decided in the next few hours. Tomorrow is the end of our fiscal year. The clock runs out to strategize what we can do together in the coming 12 months. Step up now. Your gift still applies to our matching challenge and will have double the impact, but you can't wait anymore. Please call right now, 1-800-347-5151, or visit pointofview.net. Our future is now, right now. 1-800-347-5151 and pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
That will be a winner's.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. We're going to spend some time a little bit later in the next hour talking about some of the opportunities that have begun to unfold because of the decision, as we talked about yesterday, in which Anthony Kennedy has stepped down. I'll give you some ideas on who maybe will be the replacement. And I might also mention that one of the things we've already begun to establish on our website is a take action item for prayer. We recognize it's going to be quite a battle here for the next nominee. So we give you an opportunity to sign up for our Pray for America updates. You can either receive it by email or by snail mail, and we will give you some updates as we find out more, because any of us that have been around for a while remember the battle when Judge Robert Bork or Clarence Thomas or others were being confirmed. I suspect it will be that intense this time. So we'll talk more about that in the next hour, but I wanted to spend some time right now talking about the Christian Writers Conference. And if you've been listening to Point of View any length of time, you know that every year, usually about June or so, we talk about this opportunity know somebody's a writer to go and learn a little bit more about how to communicate God's Word in all sorts of different venues and formats. So we have always had an opportunity to talk about that with, first of all, Donna Skell, who's a good friend of the ministry, and her husband Anton work there, and so it's always great to have you in studio with us.
Thank you so much, Kerby. It's always great when you invite us. It's a pleasure.
Well, and again, Lisa Worley, you're a good friend as well. You've been here the last couple of years, and again, Director of Special Projects for Roaring Lambs Ministry. I might mention both of you, of course, are the host of a radio show called A Time to Dream. And I was telling somebody the other day, weren't you one of the first, if not the first, female sportscaster in America?
Yes, the cameras that you have on us will not lie. I was a pioneer in the business, and I was one of the first in the country to do sportscasting. I remember when I was asked, or when I decided to do this, people were trying to talk me out of it because it just wasn't done.
It wasn't.
But God was good, and I went forward and had almost a 20-year career in it.
Yeah. Both of you are pioneers, so that's why we're going to talk about this. But first of all, let me encourage you, if you are a writer or are interested in being a writer, mark the date, July 14th. You might say, well, that's next month. Yes, well, there's a reason for this, and that is those of you in the Dallas area, it's not hard for you to get in a car and drive over here. But, Donna, you know, we've been doing this for years. We've had people from almost every state where we broadcast at one time or another decide to get on an airplane, fly to Dallas, and actually go to the conference. And there's a reason for that. You bring some of the best to this conference.
Oh, thank you so much. That's what we try to do. A good variety. No speaker speaks in excess of 25 minutes. So it's fast-paced. We cover a lot of topics, from getting your thoughts from your head to the paper to editing a book, to publishing, to marketing your book, just the whole scope of it. And it's a great overview. And Kerby, a lot of times I find the greatest value is when attendees connect with other attendees, and they find out what's working for them and what's not working. And they make friends, and they can help hold each other accountable for their writing. And so we've seen a lot of great people come. I'll never forget, one lady came from Alaska because of your show. She heard Point of View. She made reservations, and she flew in from Alaska to spend the day with us, and I think she was well pleased.
I was sitting at a table one day, and this woman, I said, "Where you come from?" "Kansas." "How did you get here?" "My husband heard about this, said, you've always talked about writing. I want you to get on a plane." So she got on a plane, flew to Love Field, got a taxi, shows up there. She wasn't even quite sure what she was getting herself into, and was so glad that she did. So we've got all sorts of stories like that, and almost always we say, okay, who here is from the furthest away? And that has been a great opportunity for you to join with us. And we're going to talk about some of those principles of writing. But Lisa, you're a co-author of a number of books, and don't you wish you had some of this information before you wrote your first book?
Yeah, I'm speaking about the discipline of writing at this conference, and I was not disciplined, Kerby. I'm going to admit to everybody, the world, that I was not at first. It took me 20 years to write one book, but I've learned a lot over the years, and that's what I'm going to share because I wish I would have known it. I wish I would have been at a conference like this when I first started to write and when I felt like I had a call in my life to write. You know, broadcasting is all about writing.
Right.
And so I was always a writer. It's just I hadn't put any books together.
You know, what's so interesting is we just had Mary DeMuth sitting in that chair just 2 days ago. We were talking about something else, but she has almost always said at the conference that we learned that you're really going to be a good writer by writing. And there's kind of those 10,000 hour mindset that the best musicians, the best basketball players, or the best writers have to really park their in that chair and sit in front of that computer screen or hold that pen and write. And there's a sense in which that is part of that discipline. If you are writing every day, eventually you're going to be a pretty good writer, don't you think?
I'm going to say that blogging is one of the best ways to be disciplined in writing and to learn how to better write. I'm a blogger, and so I look back at blogs that I from 2013 versus the blogs I've written in 2018. It's an amazing transition about of how much better I am as a writer than I was years ago because it's a discipline. I've been writing repeatedly and working on the craft constantly, and so I think you have to plant yourself in the chair. I heard a guy named Phil Cook speak one day, and he was so impactful for me because he said, creative people plant themselves in the chair, and they have a routine, a regular routine where they write, and that's how they get it done.
Yeah, we had Phil Cook in the studio sitting right where Donna was just a couple of days ago, too. So these are some individuals you have a chance to hear from. Donna, let's talk about this for a minute because you're going to have a chance to hear from fellow writers. You also connect people up with individuals that might help them get their book published, whether it's agents, publishers. Talk about that for just a minute.
Yeah, in fact, we just started a new outreach at Roaring Lambs called Roaring Writers, and we're hoping to gather writers together, find out what their needs are, and help them meet their needs. So we have a group of editors on staff. We have some cover design people. We have people that excel in helping put your book up on CreateSpace. So now we're able to really take writers from where they are one step closer to their goal.
And I think this is kind of a new environment where it used to be that you would write a book, you would then try to find a publisher that might publish it. 18 months later, they would give you back a galley proof and by that time you sort of even forgot, what did I even write about? And then eventually the book would come out, and then you would hope that they would do some marketing. But things have changed dramatically, haven't they?
Dramatically in the publishing industry. You can shorten that time frame, and you can shorten your investment now too, and you can turn a book in 90 days and have it ready to give away as a gift or to sell or market, anything you want to do with it.
And again, I've found people at these conferences that maybe wanted to write a book that's just fairly for the family or a short number of people, that is just maybe the family genealogy, and others that might be writing the next novel that does very well. And we have individuals that have self-published and ended up on the New York Times bestseller list. So it's just a whole new world. So we're going to take a break. And when we come back, let me first of all encourage you to mark that date, July 14th. We're going to talk a little bit more about what's at the conference. But even if you can't come to the conference, we're going to share with you a few things we've learned about this. Some of you maybe would like to get your testimony down, and that's a contest that they have. So we're going to talk about that as well. So there's just a lot to cover today. And if you find yourself saying, okay, I'm already in, I want to know a little bit more, go to our website, pointofview.net, click on the picture either of Donna or Lisa, and it will take you to Roaring Lambs. And when we come back, we'll talk about a roaring lamb. What is that? That's all coming up right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
If you do an online search of the term cultural Marxism, you will see a Wikipedia entry that dismisses it as a conspiracy theory that is supposedly trying to take over Western culture. Actually, it is the dominant form of Marxism in America and in much of the West today. Dr. Paul Kenger was on Point of View Radio Talk Show with me to talk about his recent article about cultural Marxism. He explained that cultural Marxism began about a century ago in Germany because the proponents felt that orthodox Marxism was too limiting and too narrow. They wanted revolutionary changes in marriage, sexuality, and family. They looked to the universities as a place where their ideas could be launched. They could organize the students, the artists, and the media to transform Western society. Instead of focusing on an economic war, they wanted to bring a cultural war. One of the key figures in cultural Marxism was Antonio Gramsci, who taught that we should seize the cultural means of production. That would be the media and the universities. He believed that the social transformation would be able to march through the institutions. One place where cultural Marxism is evident today is in what is called cultural theory. Paul Kenger reminded us that Barack Obama's alma mater, Occidental College, has a Department of Critical Theory and Social Justice. It promises to instruct students in the principles of Marxism, psychoanalysis, the Frankfurt School, deconstructionism, critical race studies, queer theory, feminist theory, and post-colonial theory. If you've been near a college campus lately, this should all sound very familiar. This is not a conspiracy theory, but an accurate picture of the march of cultural Marxism through the institutions. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Perhaps you have some questions about writing, and we have some experts around the table. But this is all part of Roaring Lambs Christian Writers Conference. Donna, we have to obviously tell for some of our new listeners who have never heard you explain what a roaring lamb is. Let's talk about that for just a minute.
Well, every Christian should be a roaring lamb. A lamb is a Christian, and a roaring lamb is a Christian that's unashamed of the gospel and can't help but tell others what Jesus has done for them. So whether it's speaking the word or writing, we just want to encourage everybody to learn how to share their testimony of what God's done, to write what God instills in your heart to write, and just to amplify your faith through the written and the spoken word. That's what a roaring lamb is.
And again, if you go to roaringlambs.org or just simply go to our website, you'll see your new website, which I think is so good. Changing the culture for Christ by inspiring, equipping, and providing opportunities for Christians to communicate their faith. And before we're done, I do want to talk about the whole aspect of what you do. One of the things we're going to talk about is testimonies. And of course, you also have the radio program, A Time to Dream. And there are just all sorts of other resources that are available at that website. The testimony workshops, the Hall of Fame banquets that we've had, and many of the guests that we've had on Point of View are actually individuals that received a Roaring Lamb Award and those kinds of things. But talk through what this conference would be like. I think some of our listeners say, okay, you got me hooked. What happens from about 9:30 to 3:30 in the afternoon?
Lots of things happen. Like I mentioned earlier, we have a very quick schedule where we try to cover as many different topics as possible. And we start off with as Lisa mentioned, talking about the discipline of writing and helping everyone understand what it takes to be a successful writer. And then we talk about the blessing of a blog. And Lisa's a blogger. She's a wonderful blogger. Great topics, great talks. And so I'll let you talk about blogging.
Well, blogging, as I said earlier, is a great way to be disciplined in your writing. And it also can lead to a book if you start to blog. You can take a cumulative amount of blogs and put them together in some kind of devotional or a different book, and you can go with a topic and continue to blog on that topic. Frank Ball is going to be doing this presentation. Frank's a great blogger.
He is really so gifted, isn't he? Gifted. And again, it's amazing you can get the quality of people that you get at some of these conferences.
Yeah, and he just learned how to video blog. I thought it was so cute. He sent us all his first vlog. And that's something I'm getting into as well, because I think that's what's going to reach the millennials. I think millennials love the videos,
yes,
and so
we
want to reach them as well. But Frank was so cute and sent us his video blog. It was excellent, of course, and just so spirit-filled. But he's going to be talking about that, and he's going to do a great job because he's an excellent blogger. He's been blogging for quite a long time, especially about writing.
Yes.
And so he's going to come forth with some things about writing and being an effective writer and being an effective communicator as well.
Well, and again, this is an opportunity for you to, maybe you're saying, I'm not going to write a book, but I do write a blog. Oh, that's reason to come.
Right.
And then I think you have Thelma Wells, don't you?
We do. I don't know if you've had Thelma on your show, but she's a hoot. She used to be with Women of Faith for many years, traveled around the country and filled stadiums and had the women on their feet, laughing, crying. She's going to talk about story trumps structure. She's going to talk about the potential and the a good story is definitely important, and she's going to give you all the facts to really build that story and make that story work. Being a good storyteller isn't easy. It doesn't come naturally for everybody. It does come natural for Thelma, and you will see why at the conference.
One of the things I always love to tell about Thelma is that she was invited to be a co-author of a obscure book called Chicken Soup for the Soul, and she turned it down to her dismay ever since. But nevertheless, these are the quality of people that you have there. But you have some other speakers as well that will be actually at the conference, right?
We do. This year we have Jeff Crilly. Now, Jeff Crilly has written a book called Free Publicity, and he has a website called realnewspr.com, and he's all about getting your message into media. Mm-hmm. So if you write a book or if you write a blog, the key is to get the media to pick up on some of it, and he's got some secrets and some tips that will really help all the writers.
Yeah, in fact, I read that book, Free Publicity, before I ever knew Roaring Lambs or Donna or anything. Anybody wants free publicity, right? Yeah. And he's going to give us some tips on how to do that and how to market our books.
And I think he spoke for you years ago, because I still sometimes cite some of it, because I find that sometimes these individuals only come every third year or something like that. So sometimes when you have me do the cleanup act or the hitting it out of the park kind of act, I will try to summarize some of the things I've learned from some of those. But he's the gifted individual that you had a couple of years ago to educate us.
We did, a long time ago.
Yeah.
And his son Dallas was there. And Dallas was 10 years old and had written his first book. And I reconnected with Jeff and Dallas recently. Dallas is now like 25. And time's going by, and he's written a couple books. And so to see a young child of 10 start to take on the work that his father has done in writing, and just to be successful at that.
Might mention this is the 13th annual, so this isn't the first time you've done this. And let's talk about one or two other individuals that you have speaking as well.
Well, Carol Ladd, of course, will be there. She's partnered with us for many years, and I'll never forget one thing that Carol said at one of our first writers' conferences. She said, "What if Moses didn't write? What if God hadn't provided for us the written word? What if it was all the spoken word?" But he knew how important writing was, because once it's down in writing, it can affect generation after generation. It can go so much farther than any one of us can. And I'll never forget the thought that what if we didn't have a written word from God, and how important the written word is.
Yes. And I know you got Larry Carpenter about publishing and things like that, because some of the listeners right now, Lisa might think, well, okay, I probably could write a book, but what are the chances I would ever get it published, much less even get it out so that people could buy it?
It's not easy. I'll tell you that. I've written now, I'm on my 7th manuscript. And so it's very tough to get traditionally published, and you may know that as well. But you have to have a huge platform. In fact, Frank Ball will say only 0.5% get traditionally published. That's the stats. And so I found that in my own life. Even though I have somewhat of a platform, it's still not big enough. And so you have to look at other options. And that's one of the things we're going to present. Larry Carpenter has a custom publishing option. He's based out of Nashville. And so he's going to come and speak. He always has a great presentation, explains how gifted. All the parameters of custom publishing, and Roaring Lambs can help you get hooked up with Larry and get a book done. Again, it doesn't take the same amount of time as traditional publishing does. Traditional publishing can be very frustrating. Even if you do get traditionally published, first of all, you won't make as much profit off a traditionally published book. And not that it's about the profits. We're all about helping people, but you want to get something, for your time. And so that's one of the negatives. And then, of course, as you said, it takes a long time for traditional publishing, sometimes 2 years. And by that time, you may be on to 2 other books. And so I think Larry is a great speaker, and he is going to help people figure out how to get their book published quickly.
Now, again, somebody's probably saying, okay, this thing has got to be really expensive then. So break the news for us.
Yeah,
what does it cost?
It's only $99, and that includes all day, your materials, and a fabulous luncheon, and all the networking you want to do with other writers. It really is a good value. I'm told that writers' conferences can go for $400, $500, $700, $800, and to think that we can squeeze it all in one day and reduce the price for you. This is an early bird special until July 1, and then it goes up $20.
That's the reason why I'm doing it here, because that price goes up on Sunday. So if you are really interested, we have a link, and $99, less than $100 for all these individuals. But there's more, and that is that some of you might say, I've got a testimony. God's really done something significant in my life. Not only will you provide an opportunity for some people to get their testimony published, you're giving cash awards for that. Talk about that.
We are. So we have a book that we've produced. It's called Stories of Roaring Faith. We've produced Volume 1 and Volume 2, and Lisa and I are working on Volume 3. And what we do is we collect testimonies and put them together in the book and publish the book. We are looking for testimonies about 3,000 words. You can email it to info@roaringlambs.org. We'll receive your testimony, and we will consider it for the book.
And again, a lot of that is on the website, pointofview.net. But let me take a break, which we have to do anyway. And when we come back, let's open up the phones. Maybe you have some questions. You maybe are a writer, or you've been trying to maybe think about something you've already written, and you wonder, how could I get it published? Or maybe you've got an idea for a book or a blog or maybe a magazine article or something like that. Because we have these experts around the table, before we even have the conference, you can get some answers. And I just always appreciate the fact that Donna and Lisa, and sometimes Carol, when she's here with us, can give us some advice. So if you've been wanting to maybe get some advice from some people, give us a call, 1-800-351-1212. Be right back.
Is there such a thing as too many happy endings? For the past few weeks, you've been hearing a lot of stories point of view listeners like you have made happen by investing in this work and joining this team. Very simply, without you, those stories would not happen. But we strongly believe there are many more stories that need happy endings. And though we've seen great things, we dare not relax at a time when our nation seems as divided as ever. The number of stories we can write over the next year will largely be decided in the next few hours. Tomorrow is the end of our fiscal year. The clock runs out to strategize what we can do together in the coming 12 months. Step up now. Your gift still applies to our matching challenge and will have double the impact, but you can't wait anymore. Please call right now, 1-800-347-5151, or visit pointofview.net. Our future is now, right now. 1-800-347-5151 and pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Continue your conversation today. In studio with us, Donna Skell and Lisa Worley. And if you'd like to join us, that number is 1-800-351-1212. Someone asked off air if this was going to be available online. It's not. So, I mean, you really need to attend the conference. But again, we'll try to answer some of the questions people have in just a minute. But let me just, before we get any further, mention that we're in our last 2 days of our fiscal year end. That is, our fiscal year ends tomorrow, and so we are encouraging you to consider what you might do to support this ministry. And if you recognize how we have, over the years, it's been 45 years since Marlon Maddox started this ministry back in 1972, it has been an opportunity to really reach out to individuals. Since the Writers' Conference is in Dallas, I thought we'd hear from someone in Dallas, and that is Pastor Robert Jeffress.
The program for me as a young teenager and then as a seminary student and young minister really encouraged me to study God's Word, to study science, to study every aspect of our existence so that I could be ready to give a clear answer to anyone who was to ask me for the hope that is within me. I think the Point of View is a great augmentation to the ministry of the local church. A Point of View helps, I know, the people in my church be equipped with these truths and answers that they need to combat the secularism of our day. I can say as a pastor that I believe in the primacy of the local church, but once a week on Sunday is not enough for people to be equipped with these eternal truths that come from God's Word. I count Point of View as an important partner with me in my ministry in the local church in equipping the saints for the work of service.
Pastor Robert Jeffress, just again talking about the impact that Point of View had in his life. It's been fun over the years to say, you know, when I was a student, he says, at Dallas Theological Seminary, I was listening to the program Point of View with Marlon Maddox, and the other day talking to Mike Huckabee, and he said, you know, when I was a student at Southwestern Baptist Seminary, I remember listening to Point of View with Marlon Maddox. And so, again, this is part of the rich history, and when you give to this ministry, you're influencing even the next generation of those individuals, some of whom will be pastors, others will be in business and media. As we talked about even recently with Michelle Bachman, she started listening to this program when she was 19 years of age, and then look what happened in her life as well. So we encourage you to give to this ministry, and if you can do so, again, the website is pointofview.net, or, of course, the pledge line number 800-347-5151. Donna Skell and Lisa Worley in here. We'll take some of your phone calls as well. That's a different number, 1-800-351-1212. And, Donna, we've talked about this testimony, and this is an opportunity for some individuals to share their testimony and then get published, because it'll be in Volume 3 of Stories of Roaring Faith. But you also have, I think, another contest going on, don't you?
Well, yes, that's the testimony contest. When we receive your testimony, we will be choosing the best one, awarding $100, and to others for $50 and $25. So writing your testimony benefits you. It benefits everyone that you share it with. And now you can get paid for doing it as well. About 3,000 words is what we're looking for.
Well, one of our callers wants to ask about testimony, so why don't we put on our earbuds here and have a chance to see if indeed that is the question that we can maybe answer for her. So, Dee in Nevada, thank you for joining us today.
Hello.
Hello, go ahead.
Hi. Yes, I was calling because I was listening to your broadcast, and I wanted to write a book about my testimony. I don't know if anybody ever heard of Stephen Johnson. It's a toxic medication that carries sulfur in it, and it burned about 80% of my body. I was in the hospital for about 3 months in ICU fighting for my life after the doctor stated that I wasn't going to make it the first day. It also left me blind, and I wanted to write a book, but God has given me a name to title the book, and so I heard you guys say that, if we had questions about how to get a book started, anything like that. So I just thought I'd give you guys a call.
Well, first of all, I just want to say, wow, it's great that you want to write a book, because I think your story is very powerful, and you need to write that down. First of all, just to tell people how you've gotten through this, but also to encourage people to avoid what you had went through. And so I think that's another reason why you tell your story. And so what I would recommend to you, first of all, is what I tell everybody when you're writing your testimony. You just want to put everything that comes to mind on paper. Just write it all down. Everything, just what we call dumping. You want to just write it all down. And then what you want to do is organize it in some ways and do an outline, and then begin to mold it and begin to write it in more creative verbiage, and then start to organize it in chapters. And so once you do all that, then you're going to have yourself a book. And I always recommend having a book edited. I just finished another book, and I spent the money to have somebody go through it with a fine-tooth comb, because we miss things. You think you've got it all down, you haven't made a mistake, but inevitably we have. And so you just get an editor and you get it all nice and pretty, and then you submit it. And when Roaring Lambs can help you. We have a publishing company, as we said in the last segment, that can help you get your book and make your book reality.
And one other suggestion, before you write the book, you might try writing your testimony out in 3,000 words. It might be the first step to organizing your thoughts, and then send it to us, and we'll help critique it and edit it and send it back to you, and that might be helpful to you.
Yes, it's anyway, because like I said, I'm blind. Thank God I have an iPhone. I was able to dial your number by voice command. I just remembered the number and I called. But due to the fact that I don't really have a whole lot of help to get me started, I did try to go into my phone where it says notes, and I did try recording some, but it's kind of difficult when you can't see, and you have children that are trying to find their path in life, so they're not always helpful. So, you tend to feel like a burden to people. I lost my eyesight at 48, and I'm just turned 51 this month. It's been a hard road for me to adjust to this new lifestyle of not having eyesight after 48 years of having it. So it's been very difficult for me as well.
Sure. And one of the things I was just thinking about is that I've run into people that because their hands, they can't type, and so they use a lot of the new technologies that actually transcribe it, which is what Dee is using as well. I'd love to hear your testimony sometime in your radio program, so maybe that's another possibility. So, the point's well taken. If you want to write about your family or your own personal testimony, like you said, Lisa, you really just have to dump it all out there, then organize it. But then this is where the editors are helpful, because you might see the natural connection between chapter 1 and 2, but someone else is going, you've left out something. There's a piece missing here, or the grammar doesn't work right, or something like that. So a good writer is a good rewriter, isn't he?
Absolutely. And that actually happens when we edit the books, the Stories of Roaring Faith books. Sometimes we'll go back to the person who wrote the testimony and say, something was missing here. I feel like you need to expand this area, because we want to use your testimony. But could you work on this and add the detail that we need here? Because there's a big hole there, and it's missing. And so you're right. I think you have to have another set of eyes take a look at your testimony or your book so that they can see things that you can't see, because I think you do fill in the gaps.
Well, one of the other things that I've noticed is, like we said, you can obviously produce a printed book, but now with Kindle and everything like that, CreateSpace, that is something where people can just have it on their iPhones. And I do this Millennial Roundtable. We did it yesterday with all the millennials. They don't really get these printed books anymore. They all read them off of their iPads and their iPhones, don't they?
Right, or even audiobooks. Audiobooks are getting big as well. So ebooks, audiobooks, that's going to be the trend of the future.
Well, I think that's another opportunity for Dee. Maybe there's a way that somebody with some technology could create an audiobook and have her tell her story, and that becomes something. And I have heard stories, and Lisa, you know this as well as I do, people will give this great message, and then it turns into a book. So,
Max Lucado does that all the time. He's written so many books, and I've just heard how he does it. And one of the ways he does it is he takes his sermons and he makes books out of them. Yeah. So I think it's great. One of my books, my book about female insecurity, If I Only Had, was a series of Bible studies. It was 11 different Bible studies on that subject, and somebody said, "Are you going to do something with this?" And I said, well, I guess I could. And so we wrote a book. And so that's what you do.
So again, that maybe D starts with audio and it becomes print. Maybe that's another way to do that as well. So let's again talk about some of the other opportunities if people come to the conference, because there are opportunities for people to look over your manuscript, right, and to evaluate it, right?
Correct. We're going to have a schedule with the publisher so that somebody can get 10 or 15 minutes alone with the publisher to present your works and to get feedback from that. But I also want to mention that there is an organization called Joy and Company. They do Christian Literary Awards, and they are looking for people to submit their book. And we've won a book, an award. Lisa's won an award, and so it's a really good idea to submit any book to the Christian Literary Awards and see if you are chosen. And you can say you have an award-winning book.
No,
and it's just like the Academy Awards. It's so much fun.
Yeah, and you actually get to come forward and all the rest. So,
yes.
Again, if you say, wait a minute, this is all coming fast and furious, where do I go to find that? Well, again, go to our website, pointofview.net, and you can click on the picture either of Donna or Lisa, and that will take you to Roaring Lambs, or just go directly to Roaring Lambs, and you will find some great opportunities, roaringlambs.org, and you can find out more about the conference. Again, July 14th. We'll take a break, come back with more right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. In 1925, the Bladensburg World War I Veterans Memorial was erected to honor the 49 men of Prince George's County, Maryland, who gave their lives in World War I. It stands outside of Washington, D.C. in the median near the National Defense Highway. This memorial, one of the oldest memorials on U.S. soil to honor the fallen of World War I, has stood without complaint for nearly a century. For the first time in over 9 decades, the American Humanist Association voiced a complaint. They filed a federal lawsuit seeking to topple the memorial because those who erected it chose the shape of a cross to honor the fallen. One of the mothers who supported the memorial early on noted to her senator that her son died and was buried in Europe. Though she could not visit his grave there, she said, she considered the Bladensburg World War I memorial to be her son's grave marker close to home. First Liberty Institute, along with our volunteer attorneys at the law firm of Jones Day, represents the American Legion who erected the memorial in 1925. This memorial was erected to honor heroes who gave their lives in defense of freedom. To tear this memorial down now would not only desecrate their memory, it would demonstrate a level of hostility to religion that our founding fathers warned against. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Guide at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes, and again, if you would like to join us, we'll try to slip in another phone call, but again, I wanted to spend some time talking with Donna Skell and Lisa Worley real quickly about the Christian Writers Conference. Again, July 14th. Donna, first of all, I want to encourage people that are not necessarily in the Dallas area to say it's worth your trip. I know other people that have gotten on an airplane or decided to make it a family trip, or let's have a vacation in Dallas, and drop by. In one day, you cover so much, and I know of some other Christian writers conferences at both coasts, but this is kind of the center of the country, so for most people, it's really easy to get to, and it is a who's who because you get a chance to meet some of the fellow authors, you get a chance to meet some of the publishers, and I know people that have come to the conference in one year. When they come back the next year, they're holding the book in their hand.
Yeah,
that is pretty amazing. So talk about, again, how people can register and what are some of the details that they need to know.
And I just want to encourage you, whatever your level of writing, if you're just thinking about writing right now, or you write now and then, or you journal, or you do have a manuscript, it doesn't have to be a published author. Wherever you are, our prayer is that we will take you one step further in your writing career. And so it's easy to register. You can register online at roaringlambs.org. You'll see under the outreach, you'll see Writers Conference. Click on that page. We'll tell you all the details about the conference and register right there. And so it's very easy to do.
I might just mention, too, that you got a testimony workshop, of course, the Hall of Fame, and a number of other things that are there as well. But one more time, just before we go much further, there are two opportunities, one for your testimony, another if you've already written a book. So talk about the fact that you can get honored and be award-winning and in some cases win a prize. So talk
yes.
about that.
As I mentioned, the Christian Literary Awards is a wonderful event. It's actually an awards ceremony, but they have a committee that reads every book that's submitted, and they look for various aspects of the book that make it well-written and award-winning, and then they would choose the winners. So you apply to be in that, and the founder will be at our conference. She'll be telling you all about it. She'll have a sign-up form that you can actually sign up to be considered for a Christian Literary Award. And then with your testimony, just send it to us in about 3,000 words, and we will look at it, consider it for our book, Stories of Roaring Faith, and also consider you for our radio show, A Time to Dream, which is just all testimony-based. It's an opportunity for you to share what God has done for you with the world.
Lisa, that's just a great program and really encouraging, isn't it?
It is encouraging. And what we see about this is that when you speak your story, even in this radio show, they may have spoken it before, but there's something healing that goes on just by saying the words of your story. And so we love interviewing people about their faith stories, about how God has brought them through difficult situations. We have all of our past shows on our website, aTimeToDream.org. You don't have to just tune in when we're on the air. We're on about 3 different platforms, but you can go to aTimeToDream.org and listen to all of the past shows and hear some of these amazing stories.
And again, we have some of the links there to roaringlambs.org, and of course, A Time to Dream. And if I'm counting, it looks like you have at least 9 different speakers, and this is everything from writers to publishers to bloggers to marketers. Yes, this is really kind of one-stop shopping, isn't it?
It really is. And last year, we were blessed with about 250 at the conference. Mm-hmm. And so that would be 9 professionals and 250 other writers that you can talk to as well.
Well, again, don't forget that the early bird special lasts only for a few days. I want to get it in before July 1st, because somebody would say, well, if you'd told me, I would have been able to save a few dollars, and that's exactly the case. For less than $100, you can go to a conference that I'm well aware of some of the other Christian Writers Conferences. You can spend 3 or 4 times that and again, it's one day, and I hope that you will attend. But if not, I hope you'll also go to the website, Roaring Lamb, because there is an opportunity, as you mentioned just a minute ago, if people say, I've written a book, and it's just sitting here, and I got a manuscript, and I have no idea how to get it published. I have no idea how to market it. Even if they can't make it to the conference, you can help them, can't you?
Absolutely. Just call us at 972-380-0123 or email us at info@roaringlambs.org, and we will assess where you are, what you need next, and help put you in the hands of the people that can take you to the next step in having your book a reality.
Now, again, we're talking about the Christian Writers Conference, but you also have these testimony workshops. Can we talk about that for just a minute? Because I think some people might like to come for that, because if they're going to be giving their testimony for the rest of their life, they might as well learn how to do it right.
That's right. Donna and I co-facilitate those workshops, and we have them about once or twice a month, both in the daytime and at night. So if you work, you can come to one in the evening in Dallas. But we teach people how to put their faith story on a timeline. We also talk to you about how to create a secular theme around your testimony, because when you give your testimony, it's probably not going to be to a Christian necessarily. Yes. I've had so many opportunities since I've been through the testimony workshop to share my story, maybe in a 5-minute increment. And it's because I've been through this and learned how to do it in 25 to 30, then I'm able to just condense it like that, just quickly, and be able to spit it out and share Christ with them in a very small chunk. So we teach you how to do that. What we find is people may have never talked about some of these things that have happened to them over their lifetime. And when they finally speak it and they finally begin to tap into how they felt which was new for me. Because I used to give my story like a broadcast news story. We all know about that, right?
Yeah.
Just the facts. We don't talk about how we feel.
Yeah.
And so I learned to tap into that, and that's what people learn. And I think that's what people connect with. When you share your story, they may not connect with the situation, but they connect with how you felt. And so it's a great workshop. And then from there, your testimony is spoken and then possibly written up and can go into our book, Stories of Roaring Faith. Then they might be on the radio show. There are all sorts of opportunities by going through this workshop.
And I'd love to be around two professionals because you've spent so much time hearing people's testimonies. You have been able to figure out how to hone that down in a way that you probably would not get at your local church. And so, again, just because you guys have been doing this for so long, I really encourage you to find out more about also the testimony workshop. And that's all available, again, at the website, roaringlambs.org.
And if they want to read some samples, our books are available on Amazon or on our website, Stories of Roaring Faith, Volume 1 and Volume 2. They're collections of testimonies. So in reading those, it might give you some idea of how to put your story together.
Well, again, you can find out more by going to roaringlambs.org, the annual Christian Writers Conference, July 14th. And thank you both for coming in today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Just about out of time. Let me mention real quickly a couple of resources that are available to you. And one, of course, is Roaring Lambs. But we also have, and I'll spend more time talking about this in the next hour, really want to encourage you to sign up for a time to pray. We believe this is a critical time to pray. This vacancy on the Supreme Court is going to be very important. And we're going to spend a little bit of time in just a few minutes talking about how I think this is going to be quite a battle. So if indeed it is, we want to educate you about some of the prayer targets. And so if you have not signed up for the Prayer for America updates, all you need to do is go to our website. The middle button there says, again, Take Action, and you can then just put your name and address and email if you'd like to receive it by email, or your name and address for snail mail. But either way, whether you want to give us an email address or a actual mail address, we want to get those materials to you. And so, again, you can go to the website, pointofview.net, click on the button that says Take Action. And as I've mentioned before, we're coming to the end of our fiscal year. Tomorrow is the end of it. So if you've been waiting to the very last day, you've pretty much come to the last day. So let's encourage you to do what you can to support this ministry. And as I've mentioned before, we do have a match. So that means your gift of $100 becomes $200. And you can do that by going to the website, pointofview.net. Or, of course, you can call the pledge line number 1-800. Right after these messages.
Is there such a thing as too many happy endings? For the past few weeks, you've been hearing a lot of stories point of view listeners like you have made happen by investing in this work and joining this team. Very simply, without you, those stories would not happen. But we strongly believe there are many more stories that need happy endings. And though we've seen great things, we dare not relax at a time when our nation seems as divided as ever. The number of stories we can write over the next year will largely be decided in the next few hours. Tomorrow is the end of our fiscal year. The clock runs out to strategize what we can do together in the coming 12 months. Step up now. Your gift still applies to our matching challenge and will have double the impact, but you can't wait anymore. Please call right now, 1-800-347-5151, or visit pointofview.net. Our future is now, right now. 1-800-347-5151 and pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me this hour. We're going to spend some time talking about the implications of the decision that we announced yesterday and talked about yesterday, and that is the decision by Anthony Kennedy to step down and who that next nominee might be. And also look back over a couple of these very important Supreme Court cases that were rendered this week because of their significance. You can find some of this on the website, pointofview.net. But let me also open up the phones. I'd love to get your comments. This has been a week that I think has been very significant in terms of rulings related, for example, on the travel ban, on NIFLA, or pregnancy resource centers. Another one that we will get into in just a few minutes in terms of unions. And then one that I'll probably spend more time talking about with Kelly Shackelford tomorrow, the case involving Marianne Sauce, who was told not to pray, and the Supreme Court, interesting enough, did not actually take the case to deal with it. It just simply reversed it, and that's a significant issue as well. So I'd love to know if you are encouraged by some of the things that have happened this week, and maybe if you're encouraged by the possibility that an individual that Donald Trump might put to the court is an individual that we would agree with. As I've mentioned already, but let me mention it again, a few of those individuals on the short list are people we've actually interviewed here on Point of View. Many of these individuals are people that Kelly Shackelford knows. Matter of fact, if you look at the Circuit Court of Appeals and some of the district courts, some of them are actually people that have worked with Kelly. So this is a very different world than we would have anticipated if the election go. And so I won't spend too much time this segment, but I thought at least get just a few suggestions about who that nominee might be. One of the, I think, odds-on favorite is a man by the name of Brett Kavanaugh of Maryland. He serves on the U.S. Court of Appeals. He is a former law clerk for Justice Anthony Kennedy. So you got to say, well, maybe that's a possibility. And so he has the same kind of resume almost that Neil Gorsuch did, because Neil Gorsuch had actually served with Anthony Kennedy as well. He is a graduate of Yale College, Yale Law School, was a senior associate counsel and assistant to President George W. Bush, and as an individual that was nominated to the D.C. court in 2003, but wasn't confirmed to 2006. We know how everything got slow-walked even under the Bush administration, but that is the case. Former Attorney General William Barr stated that Kavanaugh quickly established himself as one of the key outside lawyers and went to on some of the toughest legal issues. He has a keen intellect, exceptional analytical skills, sound judgment. His writing is fluid and precise. I found that he was able to see all sides of an issue and appreciate the strengths and weaknesses of competing approaches. And so he is an individual that has, before he joined the bench, was a jurist who actually took a number of positions and has been included on the Heritage Foundation's list of potential nominees. So I think he's the possible nominee, but I could be wrong, because another very significant and possible nominee could be Thomas Hardiman. If you remember last time when, again, this was a conversation that was taking place, you had Donald Trump, President Trump, actually not only spend time with Neil Gorsuch, but also with Thomas Hardiman, who is from Pennsylvania at the moment and is in the Federal Court of Appeals. The reason he's also, I think, a possibility is because he actually serves on the same Third Circuit Court as Donald Trump's sister. So that's kind of intriguing there as well. If they decide to go to a non-lawyer, well, then Mike Lee might be a possibility because, after all, he is a sitting U.S. Senator from Utah. I had learned just the other day something that I either forgot or never heard because it's one of those, did I know that and just forgot it, or whether I just didn't know it. But Ted Cruz made a case for the fact that when he was going to actually endorse Donald Trump, said one of the issues was that he wanted to make sure, and he wanted to get a confirmation and an agreement from Donald Trump that he would actually use the people on the list to appoint them to the Supreme Court. And so that was condition number one. Condition number two is, I want to add some names. One of the names he added was Neil Gorsuch. One of the other names he added was Mike Lee, who is a senator. So that's a possibility, although most people think that it's probably going to be an individual that has some kind of judicial record. If, however, Donald Trump says, maybe it would be good at this point to get another woman on the court, there are two possibilities. I think the more likely possibility is Amy Barrett. We have talked about her before, if for no other reason than she began to be controversial, at least to people like Dianne Feinstein. A former University of Notre Dame law professor has been confirmed to the Seventh Circuit Court after graduating from Rhodes College and Notre Dame Law School, clerk for Judge Lawrence Silberman in the D.C. Court and also for Justice Antonin Scalia. Has worked in private practice before of this and, of course, has been part of the Notre Dame Law School and is 45 years of age. Another possibility, but I think it's even more distant, is Britt Grant, who was actually in the Supreme Court of Georgia, 39 years of age, was appointed by Governor Deal in 2016 and actually has served in the Bush administration on the Domestic Policy Council and Office of Cabinet Affairs, and is, a possibility, a graduate of Stanford Law School and Wake Forest. But, those are just a couple of ideas of what that would be like. And just before we go to a break, let me just mention that even though this is now the second appointment by Donald Trump, by President Trump, it is quite likely he would have a third or a fourth. And the reason for that is found in one of the articles we've posted here. David French, Justice Kennedy retires and the legal and political ramifications are immense. I'll get into some of the aspects of that in just a minute, but one of the most significant is the age. And he points out, as we mentioned yesterday, that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is 85. And I had mentioned yesterday that Justice Breyer is 79. Well, actually, he's going to turn 80 in August. You will have two justices on the Supreme Court that are 80 years of age or older, and both of them tend to be the more liberal, progressive judges. So it is possible that either health issues or something else might cause one of the other individuals to step down. And it brings us back to the conversation we were having a couple of years ago, in which we said it almost doesn't matter who the Republican nominee is. You have to recognize that the Republican nominee and the Democratic nominee for president are going to have very different views about who they would put on the court. And if the Democrat is elected, then you will see a continuation of what Barack Obama had been doing. And, of course, it turned out that it was Hillary Clinton who was the nominee. And if you have a Republican, maybe that would change. And I wasn't so sure how indeed conservative, or in terms of the what's called originalist interpretation, Donald Trump would be in terms of the selection of his various judges and justices. So far, so good, and we'll see where that goes in the future. Let's take a break, though. When we come back, a lot more to cover and maybe a brief review of some of these cases that came before the Supreme Court. But if you'd like to join us, that number is 1-800-351-1212. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
If you do an online search of the term cultural Marxism, you will see a Wikipedia entry that dismisses it as a conspiracy theory that is supposedly trying to take over Western culture. Actually, it is the dominant form of Marxism in America and in much of the West today. Dr. Paul Kenger was on Point of View Radio Talk Show with me to talk about his recent article about cultural Marxism. He explained that cultural Marxism began about a century ago in Germany because the proponents felt that orthodox Marxism was too limiting and too narrow. They wanted revolutionary changes in marriage, sexuality, and family. They looked to the universities as a place where their ideas could be launched. They could organize the students, the artists, and the media to transform Western society. Instead of focusing on an economic war, they wanted to bring a cultural war. One of the key figures in cultural Marxism was Antonio Gramsci, who taught that we should seize the cultural means of production. That would be the media and the universities. He believed that the social transformation would be able to march through the institutions. One place where cultural Marxism is evident today is in what is called cultural theory. Paul Kenger reminded us that Barack Obama's alma mater, Occidental College, has a Department of Critical Theory and Social Justice. It promises to instruct students in the principles of Marxism, psychoanalysis, the Frankfurt School, deconstructionism, critical race studies, queer theory, feminist theory, and post-colonial theory. If you've been near a college campus lately, this should all sound very familiar. This is not a conspiracy theory, but an accurate picture of the march of cultural Marxism through the institutions. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. One of the things we're going to talk about is whether or not this rather unexpected announcement by Anthony Kennedy might actually change the dynamics in this election. We had that conversation yesterday. In a minute, I'm going to read one of the pieces that we have posted on our website by David French, in which he argues that this might make a difference. It might cause some of you that were maybe saying, well, I'm not that interested, and go to the polls, say, yeah, well, this makes a difference on who you vote for senator, because after all, those are the individuals that are going to have to confirm or deny these individuals that will actually be put forward. And not just the Supreme Court nominee, of course, that will be front and center, but many of the others to the Circuit Court of Appeals and the District Court and the rest. So I'd love to know if this makes a difference in terms of whether or not you would vote or how you would vote, or whether, of course, you might say it makes no difference at all. Maybe some of you are already planning on voting anyway, but we know that the turnout for midterm elections isn't as high. And there tends to be right now, especially on the Republican side of the aisle, an intensity gap. And on the Democratic side of the aisle, a tremendous amount of intensity to actually elect individuals that would overturn the Trump agenda and prevent even the possibility of the next nominee going through unscathed. So we'll see where that goes. David French, in his piece today, Justice Kennedy retires and the legal and political ramifications are immense. First of all, he says that if you think about this, the consequences of the retirement by Anthony Kennedy, both legal and political, are immense. And he says, first, let's look at the legal argument and the legal angle. And that is, he said, while Kennedy's judicial liberalism is often exaggerated, for example, he said he wrote or joined a number of solid opinions that protected and reaffirmed core constitutional liberties, including the liberties protected by the First and Second Amendments. It's a simple fact that as a moderate swing justice, he served as the primary judicial guardian of abortion rights and also a variety of others, what she talks about in terms of the relentless march of sexual revolution. Here's something to remember. There are individuals that sometimes are the swing vote, and for a number of years in the 1980s and 1990s, that swing vote was a person by the name of Sandra Day O'Connor. Even her to the court, nominated her to the court, and she was confirmed the first woman on the court. Nevertheless, she was quite unwilling sometimes to move as far to the right as you would think a Ronald Reagan appointee might make. Over time, though, the key swing vote ended up being Anthony Kennedy. And so just at a time when people thought maybe Roe versus... That was the big issue with Judge Robert Bork back in 1986. You had the 1986 Senate election in which the Republicans lost the Senate, and so as a result, the Democrats once again had control of the Senate, and because of that, essentially beat up on Robert Bork. And there was really a belief that if Robert Bork had been on the court, Roe versus Wade, which is the decision on abortion, might have been overturned. Well, because he did not make it on the court, and Anthony Kennedy did, later on when there was an opportunity to do something which could at least have rolled back abortion, if not even outlawed or overturned the abortion decision, that did not take place. So Anthony Kennedy certainly kept the abortion rulings intact. Over time, then, on the issue of homosexuality, same-sex marriage in the race, first a Romer case out of Colorado, and then, of course, the most famous one, the same-sex marriage case, Obergefell case. Each were ones where he actually ruled in favor of homosexuality. As a matter of fact, he came to be so reliable on a couple of these issues that I think many of the people that were liberal and progressive came to think that he was their friend. And then this last few days came to conclude that maybe not, because after all, when he's written some of these decisions, what he sometimes was sort of anti-bullying. And so he wasn't going to let homosexuals be bullied by the court. And then he wasn't going to let the baker from Colorado, Jack Phillips, be bullied by Colorado. And if you read some of the more significant decisions this week, you'd say, again, he was sort of anti any kind of governmental bullying. And that's kind of where, of course, the legal issue is that no doubt Justice Kennedy can be and probably will be, of course, that's still a big question mark right now, replaced by an individual that might be more reliable in terms of the fact that he or she will look at the Constitution rather than assert some of the ideas and preferences that Anthony Kennedy did, which then moves us from the legal angle to the political angle. And again, David French says, heading into the midterms, Republicans were desperately worried about what he calls an intensity gap. Democratic voters seem prepared to turn out in huge numbers. Republicans, while holding firm in their support for President Trump, lack the same excitement. And so as a result, he says, you look at some of these special elections, which have been swinging strongly Democratic, even though the genetic preferences were trending closer, observers still thought that Republicans would struggle to get their voters out in the polls. I argued yesterday, and I think Chelsea did, and of course, just to be contrarian, Nick argued the other way, that maybe that would be the case, but we'll see. After all, for an immense number of base GOP voters, David French says, judges aren't an issue, they're the issue that drives them to the polls. Republicans are all over the place on immigration policy, trade policy, foreign policy. Divisions in the party, he says, are deep and real. The divisions disappear when judges are on the line. They can debate all they want about the Russian influence on the election, but one thing is certain: if evangelicals and other conservatives weren't afraid of the impact of a progressive Supreme Court on their fundamental liberties, Donald Trump doesn't win. A new Supreme Court pick could galvanize the entire base for months. So at least that's one of the arguments that he is making. And then near the end of the article, which we've posted for you to read in its entirety because it takes 3 pages worth of material, he says, one word of caution to conservatives. We've been here before. He said we've had opportunities to remake the court, and President Reagan and the first President Bush together appointed a majority of the Supreme Court, yet Roe versus Wade endured, and the court even moved left on key issues. He says presidents don't nominate robots. They nominate people who possess their own will. It will be imperative that conservatives closely evaluate Trump's potential picks, but that person, no matter his or her record, will not only possess immense power, they'll face immense pressure. May he or she possess not just the right philosophy, but also the necessary character to do all that the job requires. So just a little bit of a word of warning. We've been here before. Nominee, because I can use names like David Souter and others to remind you they don't always turn out so well. This is the second to the last day of our fiscal year end, and as I've mentioned just a minute ago, we are asking you to consider what you might do to support this ministry. We do have a match on the table, but most importantly, I'd just like you to be remembering the fact that these are individuals that we have had a chance to influence in the past. And Dr. Robert Jeffress is one of those individuals. As part of First Baptist Church of Dallas, he now is not only the pastor, but also certainly one that we recognize so often when he appears on things like Fox News. But again, Pastor Jeffress talks about the influence that Point of View had in his life in the past.
Point of View has been a part of my life since the days I was a student at Dallas Theological Seminary, and I always appreciated the unabashed, firm, courageous commitment this program had to the eternal truths of God's Word and taking those truths and applying them to current affairs. I have to believe that Point of View and their courageous stand for the truth of God's Word certainly helped me to understand my role as a pastor was to not just preach ivory tower sermons that are divorced from reality, but to look at the world through the lens of Scripture and see how God's Word applies to today's world. You know, in 1 Chronicles 12:32, we find a description of the sons of Issachar who understood their times and knew what they should do. And I believe Point of View helps equip Christians today to understand the times in which they're living and what, as God's people, they should be doing right now.
Again, talking about the fact that in Scripture it talks about the sons of Issachar. We're understanding the times with knowledge of what Israel was to do, and I think we need to be that same way, understanding our times with knowledge of what we are to do, and that's really what Point of View is all about. So let me encourage you as we go to the break to visit our website, pointofview.net. Click on that button that says donate, or of course you can call our pledge line number, 800-347-5151. Your generous gift will be double because we have a match on the table. We have a lot more to cover right after this.
Is there such a thing as too many happy endings? For the past few weeks, you've been hearing a lot of stories Point of View listeners like you have made happen by investing in this work and joining this team. Very simply, without you, those stories would not happen. But we strongly believe there are many more stories that need happy endings. And though we've seen great things, we dare not relax at a time when our nation seems as divided as ever. The number of stories we can write over the next year will largely be decided in the next few hours. Tomorrow is the end of our fiscal year. The clock runs out to strategize what we can do together in the coming 12 months. Step up now. Your gift still applies to our matching challenge and will have double the impact, but you can't wait anymore. Please call right now, 1-800-347-5151, or visit pointofview.net. Our future is now, right now. 1-800-347-5151 and pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. One of the things that we are hearing is there is an unconfirmed report of an active shooter in the Capitol's newsroom in Annapolis, Maryland, and so multiple fatalities have been reported, shots ringing out. Of course, that's all we know. We'll know a lot more. Probably we'll talk about it tomorrow, but once again, may have a shooting there in Maryland, and just wanted to mention that in passing as we are talking about some of the things that have transpired over this last week. And if you'd like to join us in this last half hour, I'd love to hear from you. Is this something that you have been encouraged by to see some of these Supreme Court decisions this week? Are you expectant and enthusiastic about who might be a new nominee to the Supreme Court and what that might mean? Love to get your comments. 1-800-351-1212. And, of course, as we've mentioned, we're encouraging you also to take the time to visit the website, not only to click on that button that says donate, but if you haven't signed up for our prayer alert, it's in the Take Action section. It says a critical time to pray, and we believe that this vacancy on the Supreme Court provides a unique opportunity. But you know what? We've been around for a while, and we know exactly what will happen. If you remember, some of you that are a bit older, the battles that took place over Judge Robert Bork or Clarence Thomas, this will be similar. And so whoever this nominee might be, this is certainly an issue that we want to educate you about. We recognize that there will be a lot of misinformation, false information, and so we want to provide you with the best information we have. And if indeed we find out something about the nominee that is questionable, we'll tell you that too. And so this is an opportunity for you to sign up. You can go to the website, pointofview.net, and click on that section there, which basically says Take Action. And as you do so, there's a place for you to give us your name, and then you can give us an email address, and we can send you this by email, or you can give us a snail mail address, and you can click on the button that says I commit to pray. So let me encourage you to visit the website, pointofview.net. That's for your prayer, that's for your donation, and also for reading our way through. And if you'd like to join us on air, that number again, 1-800-351-1212. I thought we'd look back just briefly, although we'll spend some time doing that, no doubt, tomorrow with Kelly Shackelford and Penna Dexter. In defense of free speech, Justice Thomas wielded the scalpel, but Justice Kennedy brought the hammer. Knowing that Justice Anthony Kennedy was thinking, I'm probably going to leave, he's been a little less, reserved in some of his comments, and so he sort of brought down the hammer. And it's in David French's piece here, he says, the Supreme Court's decision on NIFLA versus Becerra, which again was the case having to do with the pregnancy may well turn out to be one of the most consequential First Amendment cases, reasons both doctrinal and tonal. Justice Thomas's majority opinion, rejecting California's attempt to force pro-life pregnancy centers to advertise for free and low and cutting, it was the doctrinal scalpel, he says. However, he said Justice Kennedy's concurrence, by contrast, brought down the tonal hammer. He openly mocked the state of California and clearly called it out for its authoritarianism. Opinion, one that, along with his opinion of the Masterpiece Cake Shop, the one out of Colorado with Jack Phillips, they will now include two of the more powerful court statements for people of faith in recent Supreme Court jurisprudence. And it has been interesting, whenever Christians have been beat up by the government, in one case Colorado, and the other case California, Justice Kennedy has stepped in, which maybe is a better way to understand for the homosexual issue or for same-sex marriage. But anyway, David French says, let's first turn to the Thomas majority opinion. He said it was far less for the justices rejected the state's appeal to create and apply a new category of speech called professional speech. You've heard us talk about this before here on Point of View, that would enjoy a lower level of constitution. Professionals, doctors are professionals, so are counselors and other mental health professionals. He says, as I wrote in a brief on behalf of the 41 pro-life, protections for professional speech would have serious consequences. And he gives a little bit of his quote there as well. I'll skip it in the interest of time to move on to say that fortunately Justice Thomas not only refused to adopt the professional speech doctrine, he criticized it at great length. And again, he gives some of the quote there, because this was an attempt to say, well, professional speech is a little different. And that is, we can put certain onus, certain restrictions on it as well. And so, again, David French says that cases are important not just for the outcome, but for the doctrine they announce or reject. The concept of professional speech, Justice Thomas has helped the preserve core of the First Amendment protections for key members of society. Now on to Justice Kennedy. He says, now, while he agreed with the majority short and brutal concurrence to specifically chastise California for its apparent view, expressed concern that pro-life citizens were specifically and intentionally targeted because of their beliefs. And he gives an example in one of his pieces there. And there were a couple of issues. Issue number one is we can tell them what to say. And number two, it was specifically targeted at these various pro-life centers. The law was written in such a way to exclude any other medical facility, any other even counseling facility, except these pro-life facilities. And so this is why you have the hammer being brought down by Justice Kennedy. And as he said, not the most subtle admonition. It's true forward thinking to go back and read constitutional text ratified in 1791. The message is clear. Progressives can't progress past a fundamental respect for liberty and tolerance for their fellow citizens. He says this is now the second time this term that Kennedy has clearly called out and condemned standard progressive rhetoric at the same time that he's moved decisively to protect the free speech and religious liberty of people of faith. Ironically enough, his sexual revolution jurisprudence empowered much of the same modern assault on religious freedom and free speech. And if there's anything that you could probably conclude, it is that in many of these cases, Justice Kennedy was all over the map. On the one hand, he wanted to protect the rights of homosexuals and even institute the idea of a same-sex marriage, and then sort of say, but it's still important to recognize that there are people of faith that might disagree, and then turns right around in a couple of cases and protects the rights of religious liberty. But if nothing else, I suspect when Kelly Shackelford comes in here tomorrow, there's going to be a spring in his step. Some of these particular cases that he was a little bit fearful of all have been kind of ruled in the direction that he most hoped for. So that brings us to one other case, and that has to do with the case that came out of Illinois, and it has to do with the various issues associated with unionism. And this one kind of looks at not only this case, but some of the others, in which David French says the Supreme Court delivers another stinging rebuke to anti-free speech authoritarians. And that's, I think, important to recognize that when we look at whether it is the issue of the pregnancy resource centers or the case of compelled speech, in this case of unions, in both cases we see some very interesting precedents going in the right direction. He says perhaps the worst government affront to the rights of conscience, far worse than mere censorship, is compelled speech, the practice of forcing Americans to fund or express ideas they find abhorrent. It's one thing to tell a man or woman they can't speak. It's another thing to entirely compel them to actually use their voice, their artistic talents, or their pocketbook to support cultural, political, or religious enterprise with which they disagree. That's exactly what the state of Colorado tried to do in punishing Christian baker Jack Phillips for refusing to use his artistic talents in the service of a gay marriage ceremony. That's exactly what the state of California tried to do in legally mandating that pro-life pregnancy centers advertise for free abortion. And that's exactly what the state of Illinois tried to do in requiring non-union public employees to fund union activities. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the whole series of cases which, although they came from Colorado, they came from California, they came from Illinois, they had to do with very different kind of issues. they all come back to this issue of compelled speech and viewpoint discrimination. We'll take a break and come back and finish our comments right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. In 1925, the Bladensburg World War I Veterans Memorial was erected to honor the 49 men of Prince George's County, Maryland, who gave their lives in World War I. It stands outside of Washington, D.C. in the median near the National Defense Highway. This memorial, one of the oldest memorials on U.S. soil to honor the fallen of World War I, has stood without complaint for nearly a century. For the first time in over 9 decades, the American Humanist Association voiced a complaint. They filed a federal lawsuit seeking to topple the memorial because those who erected it chose the shape of a cross to honor the fallen. One of the mothers who supported the memorial early on noted to her senator that her son died and was buried in Europe. Though she could not visit his grave there, she said, she considered the Bladensburg World War I memorial to be her son's grave marker close to home. First Liberty Institute, along with our volunteer attorneys at the law firm of Jones Day, represents the American Legion who erected the memorial in 1925. This memorial was erected to honor heroes who gave their lives in defense of freedom. To tear this memorial down now would not only desecrate their memory, it would demonstrate a level of hostility to religion that our founding fathers warned against. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Guide at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes, and again, this article, which we've posted on our website, is really kind of a rebuke to what are called anti-free speech authoritarians. And when you look at these 3 different cases, 2 of which took place this week and 1 a few weeks before, you see some similarities, even though the case out of Colorado had to really get down to, can you use your artistic talents to do something that you disagree with? The case out of California, can you mandate that a pro-life pregnancy center has to use its facilities and its voice to promote something it disagrees with? And then the case we're going to look at right now, can you require, in this case out of the state of Illinois, require non-union employees to actually fund from their pocketbooks something that they disagree with? And he says, today the Supreme Court released its decision in the last of these cases, and that one is, of course, the one in which the Illinois law forced state employees to subsidize public employee unions, even if they choose not to join and strongly object to the positions the unions takes in collective bargaining and related activities, unquote. Well, Illinois required employees to pay an agency fee for collective bargaining, lobbying, social activities, membership meetings, and litigation. And the point that was made by the Supreme Court is these items are having an impact on public policy and matters of public concern, and individuals that were forced to pay them may, in many cases, disagreed with that, but they were forced to do so anyway. So Justice Samuel Alito said when speech is compelled, however, additional damage is done. In that situation, individuals are coerced into betraying their convictions. Forcing free and independent individuals to endorse ideas they find objectionable is always demeaning, and for this reason, one of our landmark free speech cases said that the law commanding involuntary affirmation of objected to beliefs would require even more immediate and urgent grounds than a law demanding silence. I think it's interesting that Justice Samuel Alito twice quotes Thomas Jefferson in his famous declaration that to compel a man to furnish contributions of money for the propagation of opinions which he disbelieves and abhors is sinful and tyrannical. And so the court actually struck down that agency fee and certainly made the case. And he points out that this decision about unions followed on the heels of the decisions that came from Colorado, the Masterpiece Cake Shop, and California, which is the NIFLA case. And in each one of those cases, what you had was an attempt to force individuals to either with their artistic talents or with their voice, or in the case, of course, in unions, with their pocketbook, to actually support something. And that is what is oftentimes called compelled speech. And so, again, the concern that David French points out, and this is one of the issues we talk about here on Point of View, is the need for you to have discernment. Because he asks the question, how does the media tend to cover these cases? By all too often downplaying the law and hyping up political confrontations. So in each case, the conflict wasn't framed as a state power versus individual liberty, but rather gays versus Christians, abortion rights versus pro-life movement, or labor unions versus conservatives. But this is not how free speech jurisprudence works, he says. The political identity of the litigants should be completely irrelevant to the outcome. By vindicating individual liberty and protecting citizens from compelled speech, the court created precedents that every citizen can use in the appropriate context, regardless of their partisan affiliation. And then he asks, I think, a really good question. Do progressives and liberals, for example, really want red states to be able to compel their speech, to treat their professionals as second-class citizens, or to force their progressive friends to subsidize powerful private conservative entities? Of course, the answer to that is no. But that's exactly what has been taking place on the other side. Thankfully, he says, the recent Supreme Court jurisprudence has tended to side with the First Amendment, regardless of the politics of the litigant. It isn't perfect. No jurisprudence ever is, but it has been largely consistent. And he says when the state engages in viewpoint discrimination, it loses. When the state tries and seeks to compel speech, it loses. If the court is hearing a disproportionate number of cases where conservatives or people of faith face government censorship, perhaps that's the cause for progressives to reflect on their use of government power rather than crying judicial bias at the top of their lungs. I love that. And he says progressives should consider carefully the fact that Justice Kennedy, the man who helped preserve Roe v. Wade and constitutionalize gay marriage, not only joined with the majorities in each of these cases, but also wrote sharply against state coercion. In, as he said, the case out of California having to do with the pregnancy resource centers, he went so far as to mock California's alleged forward thinking and to explicitly call the state's attention backward all the way to 1791 and the year the First Amendment was ratified. He concludes by saying this, and it's a good way to kind of end as we talk about the career of Justice Kennedy. He said, if you follow Justice Kennedy's career, you'll note a recurring theme. He hates bullies and loathes intolerance. Much of his jurisprudence on gay rights was plainly motivated by his desire to protect a vulnerable population from what he perceived to be a discriminatory and bigoted majority, and now he's protecting different vulnerable populations from different bullies. The results are clear. Government activists, if you try to force a man to violate his conscience to advance your ideology, the Supreme Court has a message for you. You're going to lose. This has been an opportunity for government to lose a lot this week and for freedom to win a lot this week. And just as we come to the end of this day and the second to the last day of our fiscal year end, I thought it would be good to once again just remind you of the need to support this ministry so we can talk about these issues every single day. One of the individuals that certainly has appreciated Point of View is Jamie Jordan, and this is what he had to say.
I started listening to Point of View in 1985. We moved from Little Rock, Arkansas to Conroe, Texas. Marlon Maddox was the host back then, and I remember that he used to call it the Head in the Sand Club, that his kind of mission in life was to pull people's heads out of the sand, and my head certainly was in the sand. And at the time, I was a theistic evolutionist because I believed what they taught about Genesis and as far as God created the world, but I also went to public school and believed what they taught about evolution. I didn't really understand the intellectual conflict. The politics, didn't really understand. I was always kind of conservative by nature, but didn't really understand what was going on. And today, the lies from the dominant media culture are just so rampant. And Point of View is such a breath of fresh air to have the truth told. And, you know, a little light in a dark space makes a lot of light. You can be in a black, dark cave, and one little candle will light up everything. I think Point of View, more than anything besides my parents, has influenced my worldview and my thinking. And to me, it's just really scary to think where I would be if it hadn't been for the influence of Point of View and in my life.
You know, I was reading what Jeannie in Oregon said. You know, I so appreciate the ministry of Point of View and their continued challenge for me to engage with the culture and exactly how to do that in the most effective way. She says, you know, it's one thing to engage the culture, but to do it not in a human way, but to use the power of the Holy Spirit to know the facts of the matter, to be able to communicate those facts in a way that causes those enwrapped in the cultural way of thinking to pause and really consider their viewpoint is entirely different. And she thanks us for taking the time to educate her, equip her, and empower her to make a difference. And that's why we ask you, as we come to the end of the program today, take the time to visit the website, pointofview.net. Click on the button that says donate. Or even though we're going off the air, you can still call our pledge line number, 800-34. For their help behind the scenes. We'll see you back here tomorrow in our weekend edition.
Such a thing as too many happy endings. For the past few weeks, you've been hearing a lot of stories Point of View listeners like you have made happen by investing in this work and joining this team. Very simply, without you, those stories would not happen. But we strongly believe there are many more stories that need happy endings. And though we've seen great things, we dare not relax at a time when our nation seems as divided as ever. The number of stories we can write over the next year will largely be decided in the next few hours. Tomorrow is the end of our fiscal year. The clock runs out to strategize what we can do together in the coming 12 months. Step up now. Your gift still applies to our matching challenge and will have double the impact, but you can't wait anymore. Please call right now, 1-800-347-5151, or visit pointofview.net. Our future is now, right now. 1-800-347-5151 and pointofview.net. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.